Thank you all for coming. I appreciate very much your attendance today. It was just over a month ago that I announced my campaign for governor for the better for Utah. Throughout my years in the legislature, I've had a front row seat to how our government has changed. It's no secret that political polarization has become more severe, and that's especially true just over the last 4 years. Americans and Utahns have been watching leadership cower and concede to extremism, constitutional violations, and government power grabs. Unfortunately, we've not seen many voices advocating for everyday Utahns who just want their lives to be a little bit better. I believe Utahns deserve better. I'm running for governor to offer an alternative, a government that prioritizes the public good over personal interests, delivering results, not rhetoric, and a culture of courage and character, not contention, for the better for Utahns. Public servants are supposed to serve the public, but too often they prioritize personal interests and ignore the people's will, fueling a cycle of broken promises, extremism, and polarization. Spencer Cox is not immune to this. Time and time again, the wants and needs of the vast majority of Utahns and the action and inaction of our current governor are simply not aligned. 1 week from today, the 2024 legislative session will begin. I'm standing here today to present to you the legislation that I would prioritize as your next governor, legislation that I am introducing for the better. First and foremost, let's address the pressing challenges that everyday Utahns are grappling with. Under Governor Cox's leadership, the cost of living, housing prices, and economic burdens have surged for Utahns. Unfortunately, the supermajority's actions, guided by the governor, have shown minimal efforts to alleviate these hardships for the majority of Utahns. People are finding themselves caught in a cycle of living paycheck to paycheck, and the overall quality of life from their perspective is on the decline. It's simply unacceptable that a staggering 75% of Utahns express that their pay is not keeping pace with inflation. Nearly half of our population is experiencing a decline in financial well-being compared to a year ago. So what's the plan? I'm putting forth income tax reform as part of the solution. We need a lower tax rate on low-income earners and increased rates for the wealthy, reducing the burden on those most in need. We need to reduce the gap between the wealthiest in our state, those who have flourished and done the best, and those who are struggling to just make ends meet. That's basic tax fairness. It's something we haven't seen in Utah for decades. We can do better. As your governor, my commitment is to work towards reducing everyday costs, placing the interests of you, the everyday Utahn, front and center. Second, the area of healthcare freedom raises deep concerns. Bills limiting individuals' rights to make personal healthcare decisions have been signed into law with little resistance from your governor. Utahns have stated loud and clear that they value autonomy, with 86% of Utahns believing that individuals and doctors should be in charge of their healthcare decisions, not politicians. As someone who's been in this legislative body for over a decade, I can tell you firsthand, we're the last group of people that should be involved in these most personal and private healthcare decisions. These restrictive measures, supported by Governor Cox, violate your ability to make private medical decisions. Let's be clear, this is about control, controlling you, your family, and your decisions. In response, I have filed a bill to introduce legislation to rescind these restrictions and ensure every individual has a right to make and carry out their own reproductive decisions. It will ensure access to high-quality care and respect your personal choices. We need to restore your rights, not strip them. Instead of playing doctor, my bills and my decisions would put you back in control of your personal health care decisions. Third, our education system faces a critical challenge: book bans. Under Governor Cox's leadership, attacks on civil rights have been disguised as parental rights, diverting resources away from the core mission of education. Polling data underlines the need for an alternative, with 65% of Utahns emphasizing the importance of representing diverse perspectives in our public school libraries. I believe that families know best what's in their children's best interests. And I believe that most parents are more concerned about the quality of their child's education, their safety at school, and their future than they are concerned about these culture wars that we way too often continue to engage in. Utahns deserve better. We need to trust families. To counter these attacks on rights and democracy, I propose anti-book banning legislation. This law is multifaceted. It protects the right to read and makes sure books are evaluated in their entirety, classifies discriminatory book bans as violations of Utah's civil rights laws, ensures that books stay on the shelves while they're being evaluated, and are accessible to students throughout the entire legal battle, all while protecting teachers and librarians from civil and criminal penalties. Let's stand united for comprehensive education, safeguarding the foundations of our democracy. Fourth, Utah's water crisis demands our urgent attention. The Great Salt Lake is a critically important natural resource. It impacts our air quality, weather patterns, economic development, and our public health. Our best experts say that if things continue in the future the way they have in the past, Great Salt Lake will be irretrievably damaged within a decade. If the Great Salt Lake water levels continue to decrease, no one is going to want to live along the Wasatch Front. It's as simple as that. Utahns are not only concerned about their water and livelihood, but about the lack of urgency they are seeing from their leaders. In response, I'm proposing that we put in place triggers based on objective measures such as lake elevation levels and whether a drought condition exists under federal standards to require action to be taken by the state when those objective measures are met that address the lake level. It's time to take decisive action to secure the future of our water resources. Utahns should have a leader committed to addressing water issues with the gravity and commitment they deserve. This is about public good, not personal preferences or interests. Finally, ensuring the safety of Utahns is paramount. The fifth item that I have as a priority and under my administration as governor would be addressed and that I am addressing in legislation for this next legislative session is gun violence reduction and prevention. We've seen in the last few years many concerning things relating to gun laws. Governor Cox has signed into law a bill eliminating permit requirements for concealed carry individuals carrying weapons in a concealed fashion. And this raises significant concerns about public safety. Utah became a Second Amendment sanctuary state. All the while, we are seeing gun violence as an ever-present reality, increasing across the country and increasing in Utah. But Utahns are smart. They value common sense, reasonable, bipartisan solutions. 90% of our citizens support expanded background checks for firearm purchases. 79% of Utahns support raising the minimum age to buy a gun to age 21. And 60% support banning assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. This is an issue I've worked on as a legislator for years in a variety of bills, and we can do a better job of keeping Utahns safe by ensuring our freedom to live without fear of violence. I hear people say, I have a God-given right to carry a gun. I'll tell you what is more of a God-given right to me personally. It's the right to walk and feel safe when I go in public spaces. It's the right to have my children feel safe as they go about their day-to-day lives in a grocery store, going to a movie. Those are God-given rights. We need common sense results, not rhetoric. The legislation that I have introduced and bill files that I have opened for this coming session include measures like banning assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, raising the minimum age to purchase a gun to age 21, and implementing expanded background checks. As we approach this legislative session and the 2024 election, let's remember who we are and what we stand for. We can do better. We need results, not cheerleading, not rhetoric. We need to act for the public good, not personal interest or the interest of us as preferences that we have as individuals. Courage and character, not contention, are the things that we need to carry out as public servants for the better, for Utahns. And with that, I'm open to any questions that you may have. Ben?
So on the issues of like anti-book banning legislation or Great Salt Lake legislation, are you planning to introduce bills this session as a representative on those?
Yes, on each of those things. The trigger ban, the objective measures to trigger emergency action to address the low levels of the Great Salt Lake, such as when the lake level hits a certain elevation, or when we have drought conditions that are declared, if and when drought conditions are declared under objective federal or state standards. That's a bill that I have asked to be drafted and introduced so that we can more aggressively and proactively address the needs of the Great Salt Lake.
Do those have the support of like the Great Salt Lake Caucus, or are you running them on your own as de facto message bills?
Well, I've had a lot of conversations with many of my colleagues who are concerned about these things. I think that there is, to some degree, a partisan split, but there's a remarkable degree of partisan agreement about especially Great Salt Lake. And so I think the question is, how far is too far? How far do we want to go? Can we deal with the problems of the Great Salt Lake without putting in place more proactive, aggressive state action? I'm very concerned that we have not seen enough that makes me think that we are at that point, that voluntary action or that agricultural optimization, as we passed in the last session or two, good as they are, and those were bills that moved in the right direction. I'm very concerned that that's not going to do the trick in terms of addressing the needs of the Great Salt Lake. I think our danger here is that we are too complacent. Our danger here is that we're not doing enough. I'd rather err on the side of making sure that that lake gets taken care of, because once we lose the lake, it's going to be very difficult to get that back to the level that we need to have it at to have a really good quality of life along the Wasatch Front.
As you've mentioned, a lot of these bills take aim at laws that have been passed in recent years. What chance do you think these bills have at making it through Rules Committee and actually being discussed in committees?
Well, we always struggle when bills are presented that are controversial or that the majority party disagrees with to get them out of the Rules Committee. We've got a new Rules Chair in the House this year, Brady Brammer. Representative Brammer and I have a good relationship. My hope is that he feels that these are worthy of consideration in a committee setting. I'm going to be asking him to give them a public hearing. There are going to be some of these bills that have a real difficult time getting very far. The Second Amendment bills, the gun violence reduction bills are going to have a hard time. I know that. I've dealt with this for years. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't, that we can't, that we aren't benefited by having a public discussion about these things. We're all so much better off when idea comes into conflict with idea and we have a public discussion about it. If a bill is kept in the Rules Committee and never sees the light of day, it's very difficult to have that kind of discussion.
Some of the governor's challengers, pretty much the major governor's challengers, they're all from rural Utah. You see, you are running. You live in Salt Lake City.
Dude,
represent Salt Lake City.
We have two gubernatorial candidates from San Pete County, for crying out loud.
Right. So I guess I want to know on the campaign trail, how are you seeking to reach out to rural Utah? Because you can be easily cast as not one of them.
You bet. You bet. Well, look, I think you have to work hard to find things that people have common ground about. And reproductive rights is a perfect example, I think. We can have, rural Utahns are a little more skeptical, maybe a lot more skeptical at times of bills dealing with guns than Salt Lake residents and urban Utahns. But I'll tell you, reproductive rights, this is something that all Utahns, I think, are pretty much on the same page on, which is to say, we want the government out of our lives when we're talking about the most personal, private decisions that we make. Government up here, the 104 people that I am privileged to be a part of and serve the people of the state of Utah as a legislator with, we're not the best ones to make those kind of decisions. We have taken too many actions, whether it's closing abortion clinics that are anything other than inpatient hospital, acute inpatient hospital settings, or whether it's putting in place trigger bans that say we're going to outlaw abortion for all but the most extreme, narrow examples. We've done far too much of that in the last few years. And I think whether you live in rural Utah or whether you live in urban Utah, this is something that Utahns agree on and say the government needs to stop the power grab. The government needs to stop overreach. It needs to get out of our lives. It's astonishing to me, quite honestly, that I'm the one standing up saying this in the state of Utah with supermajority controlled by Republicans when they supposedly are the small government party. I don't see that nearly enough.
Looking at our recent special election, which covered a lot of rural Utah, both the candidates had their views on abortion on opposite ends of the spectrum, right? And so I'm curious how you plan on getting that message out to rural Utah.
I appreciate that question. Thank you. I think that there needs to be, this is not a soundbite issue. The problem that we've had, one of the problems that we've had with abortion, particularly in Utah and across the country, is people want to make it just a soundbite issue. They want to put labels on others. They want to say, well, are you pro-life or are you pro-choice? This is a difficult, nuanced, complex issue. It has to do with people's religious values a lot of times that are brought into play. I am an active member of the LDS Church. That's my faith tradition. I'm proud of it. I love it. And I think that there is much that we have not discussed from that perspective that informs a good discussion about abortion that I look forward to having, because from my perspective, and I think from many other LDS Church members' perspective, there's nothing inherent about a belief in the LDS Church doctrines and teachings that doesn't align with being pro-choice, that doesn't align with getting government out of our lives and leaving these personal private decisions to parents, to families, to their most trusted advisors. Maybe it's their LDS bishop, maybe it's their home teacher, whatever. I mean, these are things that it doesn't matter what religion you're a part of. It doesn't matter whether you're a part of any religious tradition at all. This is just such common basic sense, common reality that we have, experiences that we have as human beings, that these are the kind of decisions that are made. Oftentimes they're gut-wrenching decisions. And when we're talking about those kind of difficult reproductive choices and decisions, we need to make sure that people are honored, that families are honored, their privacy is protected, and they have the ability to choose in a way that honors them and trusts them. Again, trust families is one of the themes of our campaign. Other questions?
Any thoughts on the upcoming race for your seat in the legislature?
I really don't have thoughts on that. I know that I've got two great candidates that have jumped into the race for HD 23. I haven't endorsed either. I don't know whether I'm going to endorse either. I'm certainly not going to do that with the session in mind. I've focused on the session, and so, you know, at some point in the future I'll revisit that. But it's a very interesting race, and it's interesting to me. I was just talking with a group of friends about this morning, how many intra-party races there are among both Democrats and Republicans. I mean, we've got the race that Senator Bramble's thrown his hat in for re-election, and I think there are like 3 really high-profile Republicans who have chosen to jump in and run against him. So, you know, I don't know what's going on. People are dissatisfied in Utah. And you know what? I can understand why. And people want to change. I think that's a good thing. People want to revisit the way we've always done work in putting together public policy in the state of Utah. I think that bodes well for Democrats generally, and I think it bodes well for my race against Governor Cox. Thank you again for coming.